Some men laugh for joy. Some men laugh for friendship. But these men, they laughed for cruelty. The cafe was small red booths, the hiss of an espresso machine, the glow of a neon sign buzzing against the rain outside. A place where locals came for warmth, not spectacle. But that night, it wasn't laughter of friends echoing through the diner. It was the laughter of thugs. They sat in the corner booth, boots on the table, smirks spread wide. And across from them, carrying a steaming cup of coffee with careful steps, was a young man in a black apron. Dark glasses covered his eyes. A white cane tapped softly against the floor. He was blind. A blind waiter just trying to work. His hands shook slightly, but his posture was proud. He didn't ask for pity. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted only what every worker wanted, the dignity of doing his job. But to the men in that booth, he was nothing more than entertainment. Before we continue, to our returning viewers, thank you. Your support is what fuels us to bring these powerful stories to life. And if you're new here, we invite you to subscribe. With your help, we'll continue to share stories that inspire, challenge, and move hearts. And if this story touches you, please leave us a comment. Your words mean more than you know. The young man's name was Daniel. He had been working at the cafe for only 3 months, but already he had won the quiet admiration of the regulars. He moved through the aisles with a grace that came not from sight, but from memory and discipline. Every booth, every table, every step had been memorized in the architecture of his mind. His coworkers often said he was sharper than most servers with perfect vision. But that night, Daniel's skills were not enough to shield him. One of the thugs stuck his boot out. The rubber sole caught Daniel's cane mid-step. The young man stumbled forward, the hot coffee sloshing dangerously. He caught himself just in time, but a few drops splattered onto the floor. The thugs erupted into laughter. "Careful there, Stevie Wonder," one shouted, loud enough for the whole cafe to hear. "Need a guide dog to carry that tray," another jeered. The other customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked down at their plates, unwilling to get involved. A few glanced up, frowning, but none stood. The thugs were known in town. Mean, restless, always looking for someone weaker to crush. Daniel forced a smile, nodding slightly. "I'm sorry, sir," he murmured, though he had done nothing wrong. His voice cracked, but he pressed on, determined to serve with dignity. And that's when the real cruelty began. One of the men tripped him again. This time Daniel couldn't save the tray. The mug tipped, shattering on the tile floor. Coffee spread like a stain of defeat. The diner was silent for a heartbeat. Then the laughter came, louder, meaner. "Look at him, can't even carry a cup without messing it up. What a joke, who lets a blind man serve food?" Daniel crouched down, fingers searching the floor for the pieces of broken porcelain. His hands shook, not from fear of the shards, but from the weight of humiliation pressing on his chest. The laughter burned in his ears. The shame burned deeper in his heart. At that moment, the diner door creaked open. A gust of cold wind swept through, rain pattered on the entry mat, and heavy boots stepped across the threshold. Jasonstatham walked in. He paused at the entrance, eyes scanning the room. He didn't need long. The cruelty was obvious, the broken cup, the thugs grinning in the booth, and the blind waiter crouched on the floor, humiliated. Jason's jaw clenched, his fists tightened at his sides, but he didn't move with rage, he moved with purpose. The thugs didn't notice him right away. They were too busy laughing at Daniel, mocking his every motion as he swept the floor with trembling hands. Jason walked slowly to the counter, every step deliberate. The cafe grew quieter, as though the very air recognized the storm that had just entered. One of the thugs finally spotted him. He smirked, nudging his friend. "Hey, look at Mr. Bald Tough Guy. What's the matter, old man? Come here for a warm glass of milk." Jason didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence was heavier than their words. Instead, he crouched beside Daniel. Without a word, he placed a strong, steady hand on the young man's shoulder. Daniel froze, startled. "It's all right," Jason said softly. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. Daniel swallowed hard, nodding. For the first time that night, someone had spoken to him with kindness. Jason picked up the larger shards of the broken cup, setting them gently on the counter. Then he stood, turning toward the booth. The thugs grinned, mistaking his calmness for weakness. "Hey, why don't you sit down, Grandpa?" one of them sneered. "This is between us and the blind boy." Jason's eyes narrowed. "No," he said. His voice was low, steady, deadly quiet. "This is between you and me." The cafe froze. The thugs exchanged nervous glances, but their pride wouldn't let them back down. One stood, squaring his shoulders, trying to look tough. "You don't know who you're messing with," he growled. Jason tilted his head slightly. "No," he said again, "you don't know who you're messing with." The silence cracked. Jason moved, quick, precise, a blur of motion honed from years of training and survival. The thug's smirk vanished as Jason's fist met his stomach, folding him over like paper. Another lunged forward. Jason caught him by the collar and slammed him against the booth, rattling the table. The cafe erupted into gasps and screams. Chairs scraped, plates clattered, but Jason didn't stop. A third thug tried to swing at him. Jason ducked, twisted his arm, and pinned him face down on the table with a single brutal motion. The laughter was gone now, replaced by groans, by curses, by fear. Jason stood tall, eyes burning into the last thug still standing. The man hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. He raised his hand slowly, backing away. Jason's voice cut through the chaos. "You think strength is in mocking the weak?" His tone was cold steel. "Strength is in protecting them." The cafe was silent. Every eye was on Jason. Even Daniel had stopped moving, his head tilted toward the sound of that unshakable voice. The thugs were beaten, humiliated, but this time it was Daniel's humiliation. It was theirs. Jason turned back to Daniel, helping him to his feet. "You did nothing wrong," Jason said firmly. "Don't you ever forget that." Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to thank him, but the words caught in his chest. All he could do was nod, gripping Jason's arm tightly, as though it was the only solid thing in a world that had just been crumbling around him. Jason looked around the cafe one last time. His gaze swept over the other customers, the ones who had stayed silent while cruelty reigned. His silence spoke louder than any words. Shame filled the room. Then Jason guided Daniel back behind the counter. The thugs, groaning and defeated, stumbled out into the night. That night the cafe wasn't just a diner. It was a lesson. A lesson that cruelty can be loud, but justice can be louder. A lesson that laughter can wound, but it can also be silenced. And a lesson that sometimes, just sometimes, the right man walks in at the right time. Jason hadn't come for glory. He hadn't come to fight. He had come to do what was right. And as the neon sign flickered against the rain, the cafe would never forget the night when Jasonstatham walked in and turned humiliation into respect. The cafe was quiet, too quiet. The thugs had stumbled out into the rain, nursing bruises and bruised egos, their laughter silenced. But the silence left behind wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. The kind of silence that weighed on the chest, that made every breath feel louder than it should. Jason stood near the counter, steadying Daniel. The blind waiter's hand still clung to his forearm, the grip of someone who had been drowning and suddenly found solid ground. "Are you all right?" Jason asked. His voice was softer now, like steel cooling after fire. Daniel nodded quickly, but his lips trembled. He swallowed hard, forcing the words out. I should have just ignored them. They always do that." Jason's jaw tightened. "Always?" Daniel gave a small nod, lowering his head. "They come in sometimes. They say things, trip me up. I try not to make trouble. The manager says if I upset the customers, I'll lose the job, and I can't lose it. I need this job." Jason's eyes burned, but not with anger alone, with something deeper, respect, admiration. He had met fighters in every corner of the world, men who wore scars and medals, but few who carried strength the way this young man did, quietly, steadily. Daniel had been fighting battles no one saw. Jason leaned closer. His words were calm, measured. "You're not weak for enduring this, but don't you ever think you deserve it, not for a second." Daniel's throat tightened again. For so long he had heard only mockery or pity, but here was a man speaking to him not as a victim but as an equal, as a fighter. The cafe's manager, A nervous man in a pressed shirt and tie rushed forward, his eyes darting from Jason to Daniel to the broken glass still scattered on the floor. "Mr. Statham," he whispered, wringing his hands. "Please, I know you meant well, but we can't afford this kind of scene. If word gets out if they press charges." Jason turned his gaze on him. It wasn't violent, but it was enough to silence the man mid-sentence. "You're worried about charges," Jason said, voice low, steady. "You should be worried about what happens when you let this carry on in your diner." The manager flushed, stammering, I didn't know it was that bad." Jason tilted his head toward Daniel. "You didn't want to know." The truth cut sharper than any blade. At a corner booth, an elderly woman finally stood. Her hair was silver, her frame frail, but her eyes were fierce. She walked toward Daniel, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. "You served me last week," she said, her voice cracking. "You brought me tea. You remembered my order without me asking. You're the best waiter this place has had in years." Daniel froze, startled. More voices followed. "Yeah, kid, you're good. You always smile when you serve us. Don't you ever think you're less than them." The words washed over Daniel like rain after drought. For once, the voices around him weren't jeers, they were shields. Jason watched silently. This was what he wanted. Not a room silenced by fear of him, but a room awakened to justice. But peace never lingers where cruelty breeds. The door slammed open again, banging against the wall. The thugs were back. Only this time they weren't laughing. Their pride had been wounded, and pride has a way of coming back meaner. They stormed in, fists clenched, rage burning in their eyes. "You think this is over?" one snarled. "You think you can humiliate us?" Jason stepped forward, placing himself between them and Daniel. "No," Jason said calmly. "I didn't humiliate you. You did that to yourselves." The lead thug growled, his voice cracking under the weight of fury. "You don't walk out of here tonight." The cafe's regulars shrank back, fear rippling through the room. But Jason, he didn't move, didn't blink. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence filling the diner like a storm cloud. "You've already lost," Jason said. His tone was final, absolute. "But if you're too stupid to walk away now, I'll make sure you don't come back." The tension snapped like a whip. The thugs lunged. Jason moved with precision. Not wild, not reckless, calculated. A chair scraped, a fist swung, but Jason was already there, deflecting, countering, slamming one thug's head against the jukebox, sending another sprawling across the counter. Every strike was controlled, efficient. He didn't fight to show off. He fought to end it. Within seconds, the thugs were back on the floor, groaning, broken, their cruelty finally silenced in the only language they understood. Jason stood tall, breathing steady. His eyes swept the room once more. "This ends tonight," he said. The cafe was silent again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was awe. Daniel stepped forward, shaky but determined. His cane tapped against the floor, his shoulders squared. He lifted his chin toward the thugs writhing on the floor. "I'm not a joke," he said, voice trembling but strong. "I'm not your entertainment, I'm a man, and I've got nothing to be ashamed of." The words hung in the air. Jason's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. The boy had found his voice. That was worth more than any punch thrown. When the cops arrived, called by someone in the chaos, the scene was already calm. The thugs, humiliated and restrained by their own pain, were hauled off in cuffs. Jason gave his statement simply, directly. He didn't embellish. He didn't need to. The truth was enough. As the officers dragged the troublemakers out, Daniel stood taller. For the first time in a long time, he felt something in his chest he thought he'd lost. Dignity. Jason placed a firm hand on his shoulder one last time. "You don't need me here anymore," Jason said quietly. "You've got your strength back." Daniel swallowed hard, nodding. "Thank you," he whispered. Jason gave a single nod, then turned toward the door. The storm outside hadn't ended, but the one inside had. And when the bell above the diner door rang as he walked out, the cafe knew they had just witnessed something far greater than a fight. They had witnessed justice.